Hello, everyone. My name is Yu. I'm from Coast in Saudi Arabia. First of all, I'd like to give my special thanks to all of you for attending my today's talk, especially in this very hard and difficult time. I hope we will overcome the COVID-19 very soon. Regarding my today's talk, we will be focusing on understanding biomolecular structure and function with deep learning. As we know, all those important biomolecules in our body are in the high-order structure form. All those molecules, such as DNA, RNA, protein, have their unique structure to perform their particular function. In a larger scale, we also have the cellular structure, such as this actin filaments network, which is responsible for the cell skeleton and cell movement. So understanding the biomolecular structure and function can serve as the foundation for understanding people's health. After folding into the high-order structure form, different molecules can interact with each other to perform their particular function. A lot of such interaction can form into the interaction network, which can serve as the foundation for the important biological process. All of those interaction networks in our body can determine the general health condition of us jointly. So to understand and improve people's health, it's critical to first understand the biomolecular structure and function. To investigate structure and function, we may have the following measurements and data. First of all, we can have the precise measurements, such as cryo-EM and extreme crystallography. However, such precise measurements can be very expensive. So people have developed some relatively cheaper measurements. For example, to measure their low-order structure, such as their sequences, or to get their low-resolution structure images. Regarding interaction between two molecules, the precise measurements can be even more expensive. So people have developed the assay-based experiments, which can provide us with the high-throughput binary binding results. On the other hand, investigating the structure of individual molecule can be less expensive than investigating the molecules at the same, two molecules at the same time. So computationally, it is very interesting to investigate their structure and function with those relatively cheaper measurements. For example, the following tasks can be very interesting and useful. First of all, we may want to reconstruct the super resolved structure from those low-resolution structure images. And secondly, we may want to predict the high-order structure of DNA, protein, and RNA from their low-order structure information. After knowing their secondary structure or 3D structure, the next thing we care about is their function. That is how they can interact with other molecules. In other words, the structural interaction. So in fact, it's very promising to use deep learning to resolve those tasks. Recently, there is a breakthrough in this field. Based on deep learning, Google has proposed AlphaFold, which can predict the protein 3D structure based on the protein sequence. It has performed impressively in the Cluster 13 computation, and it's considered as the watershed moment for this field. However, using deep learning to resolve the tasks, we may encounter the following challenges. The biggest challenge is the lack of data. It is always difficult to get a sufficient number of training data to resolve those tasks. And even worse, the output space and search space for those problems can be tremendous. Unlike the image recognition problem, whose output is usually just one single label. For the problems in the structure field, we often need to investigate the pairwise potential between different elements within the sequence, which means the output dimension can be L squared, where L is the sequence length. And finally, we need to deal with some problems with constraints. Failing to consider those constraints can lead to invalid results. So because of the challenges, the existing methods may have the following limitations. Regarding the existing deep learning models, it is not suitable to apply those existing deep learning models on the problems directly. First of all, they don't consider the problem-specific constraints, which means the outputs from those existing deep learning models may not be valid results for the structure problems. And secondly, to train those existing deep learning models, we need to prepare a large amount of training data, which are usually not available in the structure field. Regarding the traditional methods in the field, such as the alignment-based method or threading-based methods, they didn't utilize the power of representation learning. So to resolve those challenges and limitations, first of all, we try to incorporate the structure constraints into the deep learning model by designing new deep learning architecture, which requires much less training data and can help us resolve those problems specifically. And secondly, we try to combine deep learning with other methods, such as probabilistic graphic models, which can provide us with rigorous measurement modeling and can help us resolve those problems better. So then, let's look into the first project. As we know, this microscope is one of the most popular instruments in the biological lab. It can help us observe those small items and their structures directly. However, according to a famous physical principle, the Abbe's diffraction limit, there is an upper bound regarding the resolution of this microscope, which is around 200 nanometers. That is, if the distance between two items is smaller than this limit, then the microscope is unable to distinguish them, no matter how we change the length. So to give you intuitive understanding, let's look into this microsuperstructure observed from the microscope. We use the A line to point the 2 points on the structure, which are the intersections of A line against the structure. Because their distance is large enough, so we can clearly tell there are 2 points. On the other hand, we also use another line, B line, to point another 2 points on the structure, which are the intersections as well. Because their distance is so small, so we can't tell whether there are 2 points or just 1 point. Breaking diffraction limit is a very important research topic. So here we compare the limit against the size of different bi-entities. If we can break this limit, we can potentially observe those micromolecules in our body directly. In fact, because of its importance, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2014 was awarded to such research, and it's called Super Resolution Fluorescence Microscopy, for which I want to use a Christmas tree to illustrate this idea. Suppose we want to determine the structure of this Christmas tree during night. What we can do is to touch a lot of Christmas lights on the tree. And then by determining the position of those Christmas lights, we can thus determine the structure of the tree. Although at one certain point, they are just subsets of Christmas lights turned on, and we can't control the on-off states of all the Christmas lights. By recording a video and aggregating the information within the video, we can potentially determine the position of all the Christmas lights and thus determine the structure of the tree. Essentially, this is the basic idea they apply to the biological samples. And here on the left, we show the sample data. But of course, there are some differences. First of all, the Christmas lights are too large to be put into the cell. So what they use is the fluorescence proteins, which can interlight periodically. Those fluorescence proteins are our Christmas proteins. And although the data are highly noisy, but with this idea, also we are still using this legendary microscope. We can boost the diffraction limit to around 20 nanometers, which is a great breakthrough. But here is a computational problem left. That is how we can reconstruct this super resolved structure from those low resolution structure images. That's exactly the computational problem that we want to solve. Essentially, we want to reconstruct a super resolved structure image, which is a single image and noisy free, from those low resolution time series highly noisy images. And within this reconstructed image, those white lines represent the structures that we care about. And also, they are related to the position of those fluorescence proteins. So to resolve this problem, let's first consider what kind of information we have. So first of all, we have those low resolution images. But more importantly, because this problem has been investigated for a very long time, so the physical process behind it is very clear. That is, we can use a factorial hidden mark model to model all the fluorescence proteins at the same time. Each protein can have 3 states: emitting light, not emitting light, or bleached. Bleached means this protein is broken and it won't emit light anymore. the transition probabilities between different states can be estimated with the wet experiment. Regarding the emission probability, that is the shape and the intensity of the light, we can use a famous physical function, point spread function, to model it. The parameters within the function can also be determined with the wet experiment. So putting all those fluorescence proteins together, we can use a factorial heat map model to model the entire thing. Because of these pieces of information, our problem to reconstruct this hidden unknown super-result structure is completely different from the single image super resolution problem in the computer vision field. For that problem, we are trying to guess a super resolution image from the low resolution image with the help of deep learning and the distribution learned from large amount of training data. While for our problem, we are trying to reverse a known physical process and then reconstruct the hidden unknown super result structure. On the other hand, since we are trying to reverse a known physical process, are we trying to solve a well-defined Bayesian problem? In fact, the answer is yes. All the previous computational methods are based on Bayesian. However, the Bayesian methods may have the following limitations. The biggest problem is the speed. With the previous state-of-the-art method, 3B method, to reconstruct this middle-sized patch, it will take us around 75 hours, which means this method is not practical in the real life. And secondly, the Bayesian method can get stuck in local minima easily. Then what about we try to apply deep learning? With the trained deep learning model, we can probably reconstruct the super result structure in one-fold propagation, which can be very quick. However, there are some obstacles to apply deep learning to resolve this task. The biggest challenge, as we have already discussed, is the lack of data. Even worse, for this problem, we don't know the ground truth. That is, we don't know the training target, that is the known super result structure, which is the training target for the deep learning model. Furthermore, we know that deep learning model is a black box model, while for this problem, we know clearly about the physical process behind it. If we train a black box model and give it to the biologists, they will never believe in it and they will never use it. Finally, we need to deal with some technical details such as noise. Then how can we resolve those limitations and obstacles? So to resolve them, we proposed a new framework, a deep learning guided Bayesian inference framework to reconstruct the super result structure image efficiently. Although there are lots of technical details in our framework, we used the following two key ideas. First of all, we used the stochastic simulation to generate a large amount of training data to enable deep learning. More specifically, we packed that massive modeling into a simulator. Given the known high-resolution structure images, the simulator can generate a large amount of simulated noisy low-resolution time series images. And then the known high-resolution structure images can be the training target for deep learning model, while simulated low-resolution images can be the input for the deep learning model. So by training the deep learning model in this reverse order, we are hoping the trained deep learning model can reverse the mathematical modeling behind the simulator and thus reverse the physical process in the original problem. But of course, deep learning model is a black box model. Even if we can train it with almost infinite amount of data, we still can't guarantee the trained deep learning model can indeed reverse the physical process behind this problem. So to induce physical meaning to the deep learning output, we combine deep learning with Bayesian. That is, we use deep learning as a tool to extract the global structure feature. And then the deep learning output will serve as the prior for the Bayesian inference module, so that the Bayesian inference module can aggregate the information in both the deep learning output and the original low-resolution input images. So during testing, those low-resolution images will first go through a trained deep learning model to get the deep learning output. And then the deep learning output, together with those low-resolution images, will be inputted to the Bayesian inference module to get the final refined results. So intuitively, this idea should work well, since we are feeding more global structure features to the Bayesian inference model. But what about the running time? As we have already discussed, the pure Bayesian method is very slow. if we need to run both deep learning and Bayesian, would our method be even slower? That holds the question for a few minutes. We'll go back to later. So more specifically, for the simulation, we use the sketch images and Laplacian filter natural images as the data for the simulator. Those images have similar texture as the real-life structure images. Then we use factorial heat map model together with stochastic simulation to generate a large amount of training data for the deep learning model. Regarding the deep learning model, we use the generative adversary network as the deep learning model, in which the generator will become the final productive network to produce the super resolved structure image. We used a lot of techniques to resolve the noise issue. Regarding the Bayesian inference model, we use factorial heat map model to model all the fluorescence proteins together. And then, taking the deep learning output as a prior, we will further use the excitation maximization algorithm to optimize against the coordinates of all the fluorescence proteins together. So essentially, this is the basic idea of our method. Now, how does our method perform? So on the real data, our method can underperform the previous state-of-the-art method, 3B method, both visually and quantitatively. So quantitatively, our method can outperform the 3B method by about 12%. Then what about the running time? Would our method be even slower than the pure Bayesian method? And actually, the answer is no. Compared to the 3B method, our method can bring about 115 times speed up. The biggest reason that the deep learning output can serve as a very good prior for the Bayesian inference model, which can accelerate the convergence rate of the Bayesian model significantly. So with such huge speed up, our method can perform some very interesting things, like the larger field reconstruction and the real-time reconstruction. So we performed an experiment related to the larger field reconstruction. The output dimension is 2K by 3.2K, which is huge. Because 3B method is so slow, we are unable to reconstruct the structure in reasonable time with the 3B method. So we compared our method against the PALM method, which is a Nobel Prize winning method. It limits the number of fluorescence proteins emitting light at the same time, so it requires much more frames to reconstruct structure. Although our method only used 200 frames, we can reach similar performance as a PALM method, which used 20,000 frames. Using less frames, we can protect the spaceman and protect the cell. So in this project, we proposed a framework which combines the strengths of stochastic simulation, deep learning, and Bayesian to reconstruct a better super resolved structure in much less time. Then let's go to the second project. In the next project, we will focus on predicting the RNA secondary structure based on the RNA sequence information. As the heart molecule in the central dogma, RNA plays a lot of roles in our body. So it is critical to understand their structure and function. The RNA will first form into a linear chain of the building block elements. And then this linear chain can fold into the secondary structure, which can further fold into the 3D structure to perform their particular function. So in this project, we will focus on the first indispensable step to predict the RNA secondary structure based on the RNA sequence information. More specifically, here's the problem. Given a string, which is composed of 4 elements, and which represents the RNA sequence, we want to predict the pairing information for each character within the string, as illustrated on the right. But of course, only certain base pairs are allowed, while the other base pairs are not allowed because they are not physically stable. So in fact, this problem is one of the oldest problems in bioinformatics, which has been studied for more than 40 years. The legendary idea for solving this problem is to form it as an optimization problem. That is, we will assign each pair with a certain energy, and then we will enumerate all the possible RNA secondary structure patterns, finding out one specific pattern with the lowest summarized energy of all the pairs. So does this remind you of a specific algorithm in computer science? Yes, exactly, dynamic programming. So people have been applying dynamic programming on this problem for about 40 years. The most famous method in the field, Unrolled, which has been cited for more than 10,000 times, is also based on dynamic programming. However, the dynamic program-based methods may have the following limitations. First of all, DP can be slow. And secondly, even after around 40-year study, the performance of the DP-based methods is still not very good, with the F1 score being around 0.6. The biggest reason that the DP, people usually consider DP as a golden standard algorithm for solving this problem. So they will only consider how to improve the engine function without considering how to improve the problem formation as well as the overall algorithm design. And finally, the DP-based methods are unable to handle some hard secondary structures, such as pseudonodes, where there's a jump regarding the pairing. So in other words, the output space of the DP-based methods is smaller than the outlier structures because they can't handle some hard secondary structures. So we want to solve this problem from a completely new angle, starting from the problem formulation. Instead of formulating it as an optimization problem, we want to solve it as a translation problem. That is, given the RNA sequence, we want to translate it into a binary contact map matrix, which has one-to-one mapping against a certain RNA secondary structure pattern. That is, within the RNA secondary structure, if there is a pair between two bases, then at the corresponding position in this binary matrix, we will put 1 in the cell and 0 otherwise. We can say this binary matrix can represent all the wide structures, including those hard secondary structures. In fact, it can also represent some invalid structures. So the output space of this translation problem formation can be very large. On the other hand, the solution for this translation problem formation may output some invalid structures, which are not divisible. So we want to impose some constraints to this translation problem formation so that to reduce the output space. So more specifically, as we have already discussed, only specific base pairs allowed. And secondly, if there is a loop, then the loop shouldn't be too sharp, otherwise it's not physically possible. And finally, this is a pairing problem, which means in the final contact map matrix, within each row or each column, there should be at most 1 cell can be potentially set with 1. So with these constraints, the previous output space can be reduced significantly. However, it's still larger than the outlier structures. So the solution for this translation with constraints problem can cover all the outlier structures. So how can we resolve this translation with constraints problem? And here's our idea. So first of all, we want to resolve a translation without a constraint problem. Given the input RNA sequence, we want to translate it into a U-score matrix. And within this U-score matrix, there might be some entries which don't satisfy the constraints. But it's okay. We will first use the constraint optimization to enforce the constraints and then remove those entries. So eventually, we will output a contact map which satisfies all the constraints and has a high correlation against this U-score matrix. However, this two-step solution is not our ultimate solution. Eventually, we want to propose an integrated deep neural network which combines those two steps into one model. So in other words, we want to propose a new deep learning architecture which has the constraints embedded in that neural network architecture. So to illustrate this idea, let's first go through the two-step solution. We call it U plus PP, where U represents the deep learning model, which can translate the RNA sequence into the U-score matrix. So inspired by the transformer, we stacked several transformer encoder layers to learn the element-wise embedding for each character within the sequence by considering both the sequence information and the position embedding. And then we will convert the element-wise embedding into the pair-wise embedding, which can be further processed by the 2D control layers to output the final U-score matrix. And then this U-score matrix will go through the post-processing step, the PP step, for which we use the constraint optimization to realize it. Essentially, in this step, we want to optimize against the correlation between U-score matrix and the final content map, with the content map satisfying all the constraints. So more specifically, here is the constraint optimization. So in this slide, we will translate the description of those constraints into the mathematical formulation. And then we will convert the constraint optimization into the unconstrained form so that we can use the gradient algorithm to resolve it efficiently. More specifically, for the first constraint, only certain base pairs allowed. That means given the RNA sequence in a final content map, only specific position can be potentially set as 1. Regarding the second constraint, no sharp roots allowed. That means in the final content map, all the elements within the diagonal band can only be set with 0. So we can define a constraint matrix in this form. And then by multiplying this matrix with the final content map element-wisely, we can enforce those 2 constraints. Notice that we define this final content map in this way so that to make sure it's symmetric and non-negative. Regarding the last constraint, within each row or each column, there should be at most one position can be set with 1. So this is an intractable constraint. To make the problem intractable, we relate it as the summation of each row should be at most 1, which is an inequality constraint. We use ReLU to convert this inequality constraint into the equality constraint, which can be further incorporated into the final objective function with the Lagrangian multiplier. So eventually, we will obtain this unconstrained form. And with this equivalent unconstrained optimization problem, we can use the gradient algorithm to resolve it efficiently. So eventually, it is this gradient algorithm, which is the solution for the original constraint optimization problem that helps us enforce the constraints of this structure problem and outputs the final content map which satisfies all the constraints. So essentially, this is the basic idea for the 2-step solution. The next question is how we can combine those 2 steps into one integrated deep learning model, which has the constraints embedded in the architecture. The biggest challenge is to convert that algorithm, which we used to enforce the constraints, into the neural network form. And here's our idea. So as we have already discussed, it is this gradient algorithm that helps us enforce the constraints. Then what about we unroll this gradient algorithm to a certain time step, so that hopefully in this unrolled algorithm, it will have the same constraints as the original gradient algorithm. And then this unrolled gradient algorithm will become the building block subnetwork for the integrated network. We call this subnetwork a PP network. So more specifically, each iteration within this unrolled algorithm will become one layer of the PP network. So the total number of layers in the PP network will be equal to the number of iterations that we unrolled. Regarding the hyperparameters, within this network, all of those hyperparameters in the original gradient algorithm, such as learning rate or learning rate decay, which are usually handcrafted, will become the learnable parameters in this subnetwork. So in other words, the architecture and the operations within this subnetwork are the same as the architecture and operations in this unrolled gradient algorithm. So that the constraints contained in the original gradient algorithm can be enforced and incorporated into this subnetwork architecture. So after defining this PP network, we will couple this PP network with the previous translation U-score network, so that the 2 subnetworks can be trained jointly during training. During training, we will differentiate the loss function through this PP network all the way towards the upstream U-score network, so that the upstream U-score network will be aware of the existence of the PP network, as well as the constraints embedded in the PP network architecture. So in other words, we proposed an integrated network which has the constraints embedded in the architecture. After being trained, given the RNA sequence, this integrated network can output the content map directly, which satisfies all the constraints. This entire network can be trained in an end-to-end fashion. This is why we call it E2E fold. Then how does E2E fold perform? So our method can outperform all the previous methods by about 20% regarding the FS score. Furthermore, compared to the two-step solution, the U plus PP solution, E2E fold can outperform it by about 10% regarding the FS score. This demonstrates the effectiveness of differentiating through the PP network as well as the constraints embedded in the architecture. Moreover, regarding the hard secondary structure prediction, our method can outperform the previous method by about 25% regarding the FS score. Then what does our method output? Does it really output some value structures? So we randomly select one hard secondary structure, and then visualize the prediction of different methods. We can say, except for E2E fold, all the other methods even didn't predict the outline of the structure. While for our method, although there are some minor errors here, the prediction from our method is almost identical to the ground truth structure. So for this project, we solved one of the oldest problems in bioinformatics from the learning aspect. We propose an integrated network which has the constraints embedded in the architecture, so that we can solve this problem efficiently and accurately. After knowing the biomolecular high-order structure, the next thing we care about is their function. That is how they can interact with other molecules. So in the final project, we will investigate the interaction between RNA and RNA-binding protein. Essentially, for interaction between two molecules, we care about the following two pieces of information. First of all, given the two molecules, whether they can interact. And secondly, if they can interact, at which position and through which chemical groups they can interact. In other words, the interaction details. Let me remind you of the measurements and data we can use to investigate the interaction between protein and RNA. First of all, we can have the precise measurements, which are the structure snapshots of the RNA-binding protein and RNA complex. However, such measurements can be very expensive and time-consuming, so the available data are very limited. So people have developed the assay-based experiments, which can provide us with high-throughput binary binding results. However, such experiments can't provide us with the interaction details. So it is very desirable to develop new methods, no matter experimental or computational, which can provide both two pieces of information at the same time. Unfortunately, all of those previous computational methods are unable to do that. Those methods can be divided into two categories. In the first category, people will try to extract some feature from the sequence and then build a binary predictor to predict whether each amino acid can be a binding site for the RNA or not. However, they can't provide the further interaction details, such as the binding preference of RNA chemical groups on the protein surface. Regarding the second category of computational methods, they will try to extract some statistical information from the assay data, which means they will inherit the disadvantage of the assay experiments, which can't provide us with the interaction structure details. So people hesitated to use the structure data, mainly because of the following obstacles. From the physiochemical point of view, the interaction between protein and other molecules can be much more complex than the key and lock paradigm. First of all, on the protein surface, there can be multiple binding pockets. Finding out the optimal binding pocket itself is already a very difficult problem. And secondly, even if we can identify the optimal binding pocket, the interaction between protein and RNA can still be very complex, because both protein and RNA can rotate along a certain angle, which means the search space for finding out the optimal conformation with the lowest binding energy is almost infinite. But we still want to use the structure data. So we want to solve this problem from a new angle, from the machine learning aspect. So instead of identifying the optimal binding pocket, we will try to scan the entire surface of the protein. And then by leveraging some rotational invariant features, we are hoping to resolve the orientation and rotation problem. So based on that, we proposed a new framework based on deep learning, which can predict the binding preference of RNA chemical groups at any location on the protein surface. So our framework starts with the protein and RNA complex structure, which can provide us with the labeled information for training the deep learning model. And then we will remove the RNA structure from this complex, so that the input for our deep learning model will become the protein 3D structure. On the protein surface, we will generate lots of grid points. And for each grid point, we will use some rotationally invariant feature to represent it, which will be further introduced later. And then the representation will go through a deep learning model to predict the following two pieces of information. First of all, whether this grid point can be the binding site for RNA or not. And secondly, if it's a binding site, through which chemical group it can interact with the RNA. So essentially, for each grid point, we want to predict the RNA chemical group binding preference distribution. So the labels will also be introduced later. For each grid point, we can have this such a binding preference distribution. By combining the result of all the grid points, we can get the binding preference landscape along the protein surface. Notice that this binding preference landscape against the different RNA chemical groups can already provide us with the interaction details. First of all, it can tell us which grid points can be the binding sites. And then if they are the binding sites, through which chemical groups they can interact with the RNA. On the other hand, if we want to know the high-throughput binary binding results of a specific protein against a large number of RNA, what we can do is to align each RNA against this binding preference landscape. If they can align well, that means they can interact. If they can't align well, that means they can't interact. Such checking can be quick and can be done in parallel. So essentially, our framework can provide both the interaction details and the high-throughput binary binding results. More specifically, for the rotationally invariant features, we use the framework called feature. So for each grid point, we will generate 6 shells around it. And within each shell, we will count the distribution of 18 physiochemical properties, so that each grid point can be represented by a 6 by 18 matrix. And then this matrix will go through a residue network to predict the binding preference distribution against the different RNA chemical groups. Here, Abbe means the residue block. Regarding labels, we can have 7 kind of labels. X means this position is not a binding site. P means this grid point can interact with phosphate, which is a specific chemical group in RNA. R means this position can interact with ribose, which is another kind of chemical group in RNA. And so do A, U, C, G. So essentially, this deep learning model can predict those 2 pieces of information that we have already discussed. Although there are lots of other technical details in our framework, this is the basic idea of our method. Now, how does our method perform? So we first check the crossfold validation performance on the protein level. So our deep learning model was trained against 280K data points generated from the non-redundant protein RNA complex structure. Notice that all of those grid points are generated from the structure data, which means we have only used the information from the structure data to train our deep learning model. We have never used any information from the assay data to train our deep learning model. This point will be further discussed later. Regarding the 7-class classification, since our method is the first method to perform such a high-resolution prediction, we list the result here. But we still want to compare our method against the other methods. So we merge those 6 different chemical groups into one class. That is, those grid points at the binding site. And then our method will become a binary predictor, so that we can compare our method against the other binary predictors. Although our method is not designed specifically for the binary classification, we can still outperform all the previous methods significantly and consistently. And of course, our method is designed for the real-life problems. Only checking the crossfold validation is not enough. We need to make sure the prediction for our method is consistent with the real wet experiments. So we performed the following experiment. In this experiment, we want to check whether our method can distinguish the guard RNA strand from the partner RNA strand in the RNA silencing precursor duplex. Essentially, both of the two strands can bind against the specific protein. However, the guard strand will have a higher binding affinity. Although there are some biological background here, within those diagrams, as long as Q guard minus Q passenger is larger than 0, that means we are making a correct prediction, which is consistent with the real-life wet experiments. So in total, we checked 222 duplexes. Among them, we can make the correct prediction for 76%. Note that all of the experiments are the real-life experiments which were performed in vivo, which means all of those experiments were performed within the cell instead of some biological instruments. And furthermore, the data are from 5 different cell lines instead of just one cell line. Those 5 different diagrams represent the performance of our method against 5 different cell lines. We can say the performance of our method is relatively consistent across different cell lines, which demonstrates the generalization power of our method. In fact, the most impressive thing about this experiment that, as we have already discussed, we only trained our deep learning model against the structure data. We have never used any information from the assay data to train our deep learning model. However, the prediction for our deep learning model is still consistent with this real-life wet experiment assay experiment. So this really demonstrates the effectiveness of our idea. So in this project, we proposed a framework which can predict the binding preference of RNA chemical groups on the protein surface, which can provide us both the interaction details and the high-throughput RNA-binding results. The prediction for our method is consistent with various wet experiments. Due to the limited time, I only introduced the in vivo experiment here. So essentially, this is the summary of our previous work related to investigating the biomolecular structure and function. Regarding my research, in addition to working on those topics, I worked on the entire research chain in bioinformatics towards healthcare. Regarding sequence analysis, we have developed a tool based on deep learning to model the entire pipeline of nanopore sequencing, which is the newest sequencing technology. Regarding function annotation, we have developed another tool based on deep learning to predict the detailed ADAM function. Each server has processed more than 100,000 sequences submitted by the user. Regarding the biological network analysis, we have proposed a method based on graph convolutional neural network to predict new disease genes. In terms of healthcare, we have collected a large amount of electric health records, from which we can learn the embedding of different diseases. With those embeddings, we can predict the important disease parameters, such as their heritability and their correlation. And furthermore, we have proposed a new method based on deep learning to predict the novel antibiotic-resistant genes. In the future, I want to build strong connections between different elements within this research chain by tackling against the hard but important healthcare problems. Essentially, the healthcare problems can be divided into 3 categories: monitoring, diagnosing, and curing. So for monitoring, we want to predict the health condition of patients. We want to predict their future health condition based on their current health condition, genetic information, as well as other auxiliary information, so that we can make some preparation in case of emergency. Regarding diagnosing, only after we have diagnosed the specific disease that the patient has, can the doctor give the detailed treatment protocol. However, nowadays, the diagnosing process can still be very time-consuming for the real diseases. For example, in Europe, on average, it will take us around 9 years to make a correct diagnosis for the real diseases. So in the future, we want to use the deep learning and the multimodal data to accelerate this diagnosing process. Finally, regarding curing, there is one very interesting research topic, that is to design new drugs. In fact, This research topic is related to my previous research on investigating the interaction between protein and RNA. The drug will also interact with the abnormal molecule. By binding against them and preventing them from functioning, the drug can help us cure the disease. So eventually, I hope my future research can benefit the society, improving people's health and wellness directly. But of course, such research can be very difficult. It won't be successful without the joint work of researchers from different fields, including computational biology, experimental biology, machine learning, data mining, statistics, high-performance computing, and other fields. So I want to thank my collaborators from different fields during my PhD study. I want to thank my collaborators within course, such as my supervisor, and the researchers from different fields, including biology, high-performance computing, bioinformatics, and physics. At the same time, I want to thank my collaborators from different institutes and different fields, such as computational biology, machine learning, experimental biology, and computational chemistry. Without collaborating with them, my PhD life will be much less fruitful and enjoyable. I want to give my special thanks to all of them. At the same time, I'm looking forward to collaborating with more researchers from different fields in the future. Finally, thank you very much for your attention. I'll be more than happy to take any questions you have.